Reggie here, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. In this video, we are going to take a look at a couple of really awesome books that potentially you may have had your eye on before, but for some reason or another were unable to pick up. And in this video, what I'm going to try to do is to articulate why these are awesome books and why you may want to consider putting them back on your list if you've taken them off the list. Generally speaking, I would encourage you to always use your own judgment when watching videos like this. And as one subscriber pointed out recently, I do not give financial advice, but I will give you a couple of things to think about. And potentially, the way that I approach this might be something that you can leverage for your own situation. If you have not yet subscribed to the channel, I want to encourage you to do so. And if you find this video helpful, I want to encourage you to help me to spread the word by sharing it in your own network. I hope you enjoy. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of examples. And the very first one is here on screen. It is Moon Knight issue number 1. This specifically is the first self-titled and ongoing series for Moon Knight, released in 1980. Very, very cool book right here. I've read this one several times. I've also showcased this book several times on the channel. But as we look at this one, what we can see is a couple of really interesting things. And let me try to make this larger so that you all can see it. Right from the very top, you can see that there are roughly 11,000 total graded copies of this book out there on the CGC census. Just over 10,000 of those happen to be Universal Blue Label. But as you look here at the 9.8, you can see that a relatively small number of those happen to be 9.8s, right? There are roughly 1,153 copies. About half of those or so have traded hands in the last whatever time period Go Collect looks at here. The FMV for this book is around $500. And again, that is a mathematical calculation. But over on the right-hand side, you can see high level the trend as to what is happening with this book. This book a year ago was about $600. 90-day was at $383. The 30-day has bounced up to about $470. But the real story comes in when you drill down into the actual listing itself. You can take a closer look at some of that data and specifically what is happening. Over here on the right-hand side, you see those similar numbers, 470, which is up from 383, which was down from the 602 mark, FMV at $500 right there. The graph kind of tells part of the story. But what you can see here is what's happening with this book, specifically the individual sales. Earlier this month, one was being offered up for $460. It was the best offer. I looked this one up and it actually sold for $437. Before that, there was a sale earlier in the month of March for close to $500. Before that, $480. Before that, it was somewhere sub $500. How low? I didn't look these three up, but there were several in a row that sold in February, all best offers, all on eBay. So again, a really cool book here that is not going for a crazy amount of money as it is right now, right? Back in October of 2021, this book was going for $1,100. In January, it was just under $1,000. What happened in September of 2022, the book was $702. And again, right now we're looking at roughly $437, which was the last sale here on eBay. So not a terrible book, right? You know, I would say to you, Moon Knight is a solid character that definitely has a solid fan base out there. Now, here's the thing. You could go ahead and pick this book up, right? Because there's a chance that this book will continue to rebound, that the price of this book will continue to go up. Maybe we've seen it hit its bottom. Because again, if you stretch it out, you can see here that this book was, what is that? In January, $338. I mean, that was pretty darn low. I mean, we hadn't seen a number like that since December of 2022. I'm sorry, of 2020. So this book may have, reached its bottom earlier this year and is now on the rebound. It could potentially continue going up, especially if there's going to be a second season of the Moon Knight show, especially if this character appears in any other movie or TV show, which is always a possibility. The 9.8 is not a bad book. It's not a bad book at all. But I want to show you something. I want to show you something in comparison to that book, just for the sake of discussion and comparison. I want to show you this book right here. This is Werewolf by Night, issue number 32. And this is the first appearance of Moon Knight and also the origin. So it's not the ongoing series, but it is his first appearance back in 1975. Now, this one, there are only 5,400 copies of this book on the census in total. So I want to drill down here really quickly, and I want to look at a 3.5. Here's a 3.5. There's 162 of these on the CGC census. A very small number of them have actually traded hands. Look at that FMV. Look at that FMV, 475. The other was 500 for a 9.8. But let's drill into this one and let's see what this book might be going for. So you can see here graphically how this is kind of playing out. You see this book was pretty high back in January of 21, but has since kind of died off. But if you look here at the 30-day average, 573. And if you look at the most recent sale, pretty much on the same day as one of those recent sales for Moon Knight issue number 1, you can see that this book sold for $559. I mean, you were talking about a $122 difference between his first ongoing series and his actual first appearance from 1975. Will this book stay this low? I don't know, right? But if you are a fan of Moon Knight, you have a couple of options. You can pick up a really nice copy of his ongoing series at a 9.8, or you could save a couple of extra dollars, maybe sell off a book or two and put yourself in a position to buy a respectable grade. A 3.5 is not a bad grade for this book. And if you want to spend a little bit more, you could probably get a 4.0 or something like that. It really is going to come down to timing. But let's look at this book. I mean, that's not a terrible looking book. I mean, it's worn right on this lower right-hand corner, upper corner, and then over on the spine. But that is not a terrible looking book. This one also had the custom label. I don't necessarily get the custom label, but that is an option. But this is something to consider. This is something to consider if you happen to be a Moon Knight fan and you want to get in on that action. You have a couple of ways to do so. So the next book that I want to look at is another really cool book, in my opinion. This is Silver Surfer issue number 3. And I'm fortunate that I have the entire run of this Silver Surfer limited series. But this one was released in 1968. Stan was the editor and also the script writer for this one. So I want to take a look at this book. And there are roughly 3,300 copies of this book total on the CGC census, which isn't a lot. That's not a terrible number of books, but you can see as you look here in the column on the right, there's not a whole lot of sales activity for some of these higher grades. So we're going to drill down and ever so quickly take a look at a couple here. This is the 8.0. There's 238 copies of this book on the census. The 30-day average for this book is 962. But let's drill down and see specifically what is happening with this book. And you can see graphically here that this book may have bottomed out. Maybe it has reached its bottom. You know, it's definitely not back to where it was in 2020, like we may have just seen with Moon Knight issue number 1. But this is a respectable grade for sure. At an 8.0, $1,000, it may have reached as low as it's going to go. Only time will tell. That book is up at $1,009. It is actually up from maybe where it was previously in February at around, the average, 930, 940, something like that. Somebody would have to do that quick math for me there. But this is not a terrible book to get, especially if you've been priced out of getting Mephisto's first appearance, because that is exactly what Silver Surfer issue number 3 happens to be. So not a terrible price there. Let's look at the 7.5. 7.5 and the 8.0 aren't that far off in price. The 8.0 we just saw was $1,009 for the most recent sale. Let's look at what's happening here with the 7.5. It is, what is that about? Which is interesting. The most recent sale for this one is $875. So that's not a huge delta between the 8.0 and the 7.5. And again, if this is a book that you're interested in, it may just come down to the timing, because you see a little bit of variability in the value for the 7.5. It's a little up and down, bouncing from 900 to 600 or so. It's like just bouncing back and forth between 6 and 9. And so maybe if the most recent was close to 9, the next one will be close to 6, which might not be a bad time to pick it up. But if you get it, if you're at the 900 mark, I would potentially go for that 8.0, pay the couple of extra bucks and snag it. But let's go ahead and take a look at one additional example here. This is a 7.0 for that exact same book. And you actually see a bigger delta here with the value versus what we just looked at. And you can see that this book is has reached its low. It looks like back in December of 2022 at around $500. We saw that same price in 2020, November 2020. So maybe this book has indeed reached its bottom and is now starting to recover. The most recent sale for this book was $5.99, and that was an auction on eBay. So this one appears to be a little bit more affordable, maybe a little bit less variability and maybe volatility than what we saw with the 7.5. Again, if this is a book that you're interested in, you have a couple of options to consider. The interesting thing with this book is that maybe there's a little bit of fatigue with this one, because Mephisto is a character that has been rumored to be coming to the MCU for such a long time. It was supposed to happen with the WandaVision show. Almost 2 years ago, at least a year ago. There was a lot of excitement around that. Then a lot of people thought that he was going to appear here, there, in the other place. And there's been all of these rumors about Mephisto for an extended period of time. And potentially people are just a little frustrated with it, maybe tuning it out and not paying as close attention to this book, which is why we are starting to see the values of this one maybe flatten out just a little bit. So if Mephisto is a book that you're interested in, or a character you're interested in, now could be potentially the time to pick it up, because you could make the argument that at some point Mephisto is going to appear, that at some point all of these rumors will be proven true, because the current one now is that Mephisto is going to have a spin-off TV show, is going to appear in the Agatha Harkness show. Who knows what's going to happen with this one? But this is not a terrible book. This is not a terrible book at all. And again, if this is one that you've had your eyes on for a while, now could potentially be the time to pick this one up. To that point, we're going to take a look at one last example here. And this is a book that may be cooling off as a result of various delays. This book was crazy expensive at various points, both raw and graded. This is the first appearance of Echo, Daredevil issue number 9 from 1999. Book again was crazy expensive at various points. There are roughly just under 2,500 copies of this book on the census, and you can look here and see that 1,200 of them are graded a 9.8. Again, you can see roughly what is happening with FMV, as well as the possible trend associated with this book. But let's drill in and let's get some additional detail here. You can see graphically how this is playing out. Look at the curve. Look at what is happening with the curve of this book. This book back in May of 2021 was going for $900. It dropped down to September 21, $800. Dropped a little bit more to just under $800, and the low appears to be $218 in November of 2022, which is that lower? 218? Yeah, I mean it hasn't been maybe that low since around, let's just say February of 21. This book most recently went for $215. $215 was the most recent price for this book. And at some point, theoretically, the Echo show is going to be made, even though it's been delayed multiple times. I guess the belief is that the Echo show will still happen. There's the book, this wonderful, I think it's David Mack cover, right? David Mack cover. Maybe this is one that you've had your eyes on. Maybe you've been priced out of this one for lots of different reasons. At $215, that might not be a bad price to pay. I want to glance at one more here. That the 9.6. There are 590 copies of the 9.6 on the census. A lot of people recognize some great values here with the 9.6. So I want to look at that one, and you can see again graphically how this is playing out. The most recent sale for this book, $89. $89 for a 9.6. And there's a hair's difference between the 9.8 and the 9.6. So again, just a really cool book that if you've had your eyes on, you may want to consider picking up. So there you have it. That is essentially a rundown of a couple of books that you may want to snag now. At the end of the day, I would encourage you to use your own judgment. When you think about what it is that you want to pick up, maybe you think about some of the methodology that I've used here, maybe some of the data analysis that I've used here, and you apply it to your own situation and figure out what it is that you want to do. With that said, if you enjoyed this video, I want to encourage you to go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. If you have a question for me, feel free to leave that down in the comment section because I do respond to that. And if you happen to be on Instagram and want to reach out, you can do that as well at Regie Collects. Take care.
This thing on? Mic check. I just want to make sure y'all can hear me clearly. Yeah. Should you practice art? Or should art be your practice? I had a question, so I asked it. Not to anyone specifically, but to my inner God, you know? The one that's gonna be a master. The one that's more than a rapper. The one that's an educator. The one that seeks enlightenment. He travels with concepts. He's got the mindset expansive. He understands that it's time combined with travel and concepts makes his mind convex. Sort of like when you look at a brain scan. Straight off meditation, we was concaving until we had that eternal dialogue that created our dialect. Now we in distinct rooms of pure souls having them conversations. Synergy and combinations. You fly and we waiting. Indian style and the gold.